bringing you the biggest and best action from all over the Republic. All right, time to cast our eyes on the ground and see what's shaking.
Hello and welcome back to the Racing Games channel. My name is Mark and today I'm here to give you my thoughts on Riders Republic, a mass multiplayer sports game developed by Ubisoft Annecy and published by Ubisoft. The game could be seen as a spiritual successor to Ubisoft Annecy's 2016 game Steep, as it certainly carries over elements such as glide suits, snowboarding and skiing. I'll be the first to admit this kind of game doesn't usually grab my attention, but there was something about this that I just had to try out and see for myself. So with that in mind, here's what I think about Riders Republic. Let's start with an easy one. This game is gorgeous. Taking place mostly high up in the mountains, the game is set in an open world that meshes together 7 distinct American national parks, these being Bryce Canyon, Canyonlands, Grand Teton, Mammoth Mountain, Sequoia Park, Yosemite Valley, and Zion. Each park acts like an in-game biome, with its own unique landmarks, climate, and sports events, such as BMX racing around the mountain pass or downhill skiing from the peaks. Even the world map gets in on the action. In the map screen, players can switch between a 2D and 3D view, with the latter acting as an eye in the sky, really showing off the sheer scale and beauty of the world of Riders Republic. Players can fast travel using the map, with each area having fast travel points located near most events. Fast travelling in the game is represented by hopping in a helicopter, but I'll come back to that in a bit. Nestled in the centre of the map is Riders Ridge, the central hub where players can kick back, relax and even go shopping at the in-game store. This is a neat little addition to the game, as it acts as a means for players to interact with one another. Considering this is a mass multiplayer game, having the store only accessible from the pause menu would mean some players may never see anyone else whilst playing, leading to a more lonely and isolated experience. Personally, I'm a big fan of having a central hub for player interaction, and having it in the centre of the map means it's always easy to find. The changes between biomes are very cleverly done. One minute you're snowboarding down the side of a mountain, next you notice the snow is thinning out and the ground is getting dustier. Before you know it, you need to switch to your BMX or road bike in order to continue your travels. This means travelling from one side of the map to the other will see you switching to every sport available in the game, so you'd better brush up on all your skills now. So overall, the world of Riders Republic is beautifully awesome. Now let's take a look at the gameplay and see how that matches up. Games like Riders Republic can be hit or miss when it comes to gameplay, so I'm happy to report that for the most part this game is very well rounded. In total there are 6 main activities players can compete in, including bike freestyling, bike racing, snowboard or ski freestyling, snowboard or ski racing, wingsuit gliding, and rocket wingsuit flying. Each of these have their own challenges, with the races requiring you to hit checkpoints and stay on track, whilst the freestyling requires you to nail the perfect trick in landing. Luckily for me, there's a very in-depth tutorial at the start of the game that introduces the world of Riders Republic, as well as teaching you the basics for each activity. Getting around the map is easy thanks to the fast travel. This is explained as using a helicopter stationed at Riders Ridge to multiple drop-off locations in different parks. This is a nice little detail. The developers didn't need to add any explanation, but I like the fact they chose to. Before I get into that too much though, let's talk about character customization screens. This is the first thing any player sees when starting a new game, where they can create their character that they will use throughout their playthrough. The character designer has some interesting options, with players able to choose green skin for example. I did feel the designer was a little lacking with some of the options, but I'll save that for the end of this video. For what it is, it's a cool little feature that gives the player some freedom when setting up their game. Once the player has their character, they're taken to the intro cutscene of the game. I'll go on record now to say I love the intros of Ubisoft's games, and Riders Republic is no different. Ever since I raced Ezio's brother up the clock tower in Assassin's Creed 2, I've been a big fan of the way Ubisoft incorporate intros into their games. Riders Republic starts off with sweeping vistas showing off the world you're about to inhabit, with whimsical music creating the perfect ambience. which is then shattered by your character flying off his or her bike before the game's Ridge TV starts playing. This perfectly demonstrates the tone of the game. Beautiful, yet humorous. Then, just like that, you're thrown straight into the action. A downhill BMX race seamlessly leads into a rocket wing checkpoint challenge that then transitions into a skiing trick race. The intro to Riders Republic is truly epic, really pumping you up for what lies ahead. These races introduce you to the game's control scheme. As a whole, the controls are intuitive. However, there are some elements I found to be a little clunky. Steering at high speeds was really tricky, yet even slightly tapping the brakes meant slowing down too much and getting overtaken. In the opening races, this wasn't a huge issue, but once I was competing in multiplayer events, this made placing well in races almost impossible. The controls also felt a little sluggish when pulling off tricks. Lining up a perfect landing was thwarted by a slight delay between pressing a button and your character responding. This might have just been me still learning the game, but having to go through the same challenge multiple times just because my landing was ruined by a slow to respond button input was very frustrating. Despite that though, the gameplay is fun and innovative. Collecting landmarks around the map is a good way to get players to explore the world, as well as adding that educational element that Ubisoft are now including in their games. The sound design is on point, with the ambient natural sounds creating an immersive environment, whilst the Ridge TV interludes add extra world building with a humorous twist. All of this is further enhanced by your character reacting to their situation. Flying off a ramp is met with a whooping cheer, hitting a tree results in a pained grunt, and falling from a distance leads to a panicked cry. Sometimes these sounds kick in a little too much, especially when your character thinks they're falling when really it's just a giant ramp, but it's still a nice little touch that adds that little extra to the game. The levelling up system in Riders Republic is nothing new necessarily, but is still well implemented into the game. Players level up by gaining XP, either from completing events or pulling off spontaneous tricks as they explore the map. It's important to note at this point that your progression is separate for each sport, so to level up in every sport, you need to compete in every sport. Again, I like this feature. It forces you to play the full game rather than just cherry pick your favourites to level up overall. Leveling up in each sport unlocks new gear in that sport, with new bikes, skis, snowboards and even snowmobiles and rocket bikes becoming available as you progress. Players are also awarded stars for completing events, each requiring the player to hit certain goals during the event, for example completing a race under a specific time or on a certain difficulty. Earning stars also works towards unlocking aspects of the game, so again the player has the incentive to repeat events to get that extra star. Finally, let's talk about the multiplayer aspect. During the tutorial levels, multiplayer is disabled, meaning you learn the ropes on your own. Once you've achieved your 11 stars however, Riders Ridge is unlocked and along with it multiplayer. Some people might not be a fan of being locked out to begin with, but I actually quite like it. Being able to learn a game at your own pace without worrying about more experienced players with better equipment ruining your races is a welcome relief. However, there is still a steep learning curve once you enter your first mass event. Up to 64 players can enter a single event, with the event I entered taking place over 3 different races. Each race is absolute chaos, with players bumping each other all over the track. On more than one occasion I missed a checkpoint because someone knocked me off the track, which can be very frustrating. My advice is to wait until you have better gear before entering your first mass multiplayer, just to give yourself a fighting chance. So now we've talked about the gameplay, let's look at the positives and negatives of Riders Republic.
Subscription.
So I'm going to flip the script here and talk about the negatives first. I've already mentioned the clunky controls, but considering this is a game that relies heavily on its controls, I'm going to talk about them again here. When pulling off tricks, players have the choice between manual landings and auto landings. Manual landings mean the player has to line up their bike or board with the ground before landing so as to pull off the perfect landing. Considering a lot of events force players to use manual landings, you'd think the controls would allow a relatively easy perfect landing. Sadly, this is not the case. I found it very difficult to execute tricks with more than one flip or spin, as trying to line up your character for the landing becomes impossible. For example, pressing the Y button on an Xbox controller initiates a front flip. Letting go of the Y button at any time leaves your character in whatever position they were in. Repressing Y at this point will make your character start moving again, eventually. Normally, before this happens though, they've snapped their neck on the ground. The game instructs you to use A to correct an over-rotation, but again, the delay in response leads to a wipeout when they hit the ground. This is incredibly annoying when attempting more difficult tricks, as if you don't quite line up with the ground first time, there's not enough time to correct before landing. I lost several perfect landings to this, meaning I had to retry the same event many times before finally nailing it. Even then though, I had to limit my tricks to just one flip or spin just to be able to land, affecting my overall score. The unresponsive controls also transfer into basic races. I've already mentioned higher speeds make steering harder, but in some races this was the difference between first and last. Obviously the faster you go, the harder steering should be, but in my opinion BMX races in particular had a sharp drop off in responsive steering, but a quick tap of the brakes for tight corners led to my character almost stopping dead in their tracks. Then there's the bumping. Like any multiplayer game, there's always one individual who wants to watch the world burn. In this case by turning their bike into a bumper car and by pushing you off the track. In a 64 player event, it's incredibly difficult to stay on track, with players all over the place competing for track space. It seems in these events everything is suddenly made of elastic, as even the slightest touch can throw you into a tree or rock. If you miss a checkpoint, you have to either backtrack to get it or be reset on track just before it. This is like the flashback in the F1 games. However, because this is multiplayer, everyone else continues whilst you're rewinding, meaning you end up further behind. Out of the 3 multiplayer races I competed in, I only finished 1. The other 2 times I was timed out, as first place had crossed the line whilst I was only halfway through the course. My final negatives are the little things. Like I said before, the character design was a little lacking in choices. Instead of just choosing facial presets, I would have liked to have seen a series of sliders at least, to really make it my choice. The tutorial feels a little too on rails at times as well. When first seeing the map, I wanted to pan across and explore it for myself, but instead was forced to select the event the map was already focused on. It's a minor irritation, but I like maps, and I like even more to work some things out for myself. Contrast this with the trick tutorials, where the game goes too far the other way. I would have liked a demonstration cutscene or something for some of the tricks, rather than just a pop-up box that isn't immediately obvious in what it's trying to tell you. Some of the landmark cutscenes also linger just a little bit too long for me. I had time to read the text 5 times over, and was still sitting there waiting for something to happen. When travelling on foot, the camera is just a little too close to the character for my liking. With only 2 camera options, third person or first person, this made looking around more hassle than it needed to be. Another gripe was the rocks. In some skiing races, certain rocks look like ramps. In bike races, you could use them to get some air. In skiing or snowboarding races, you use them to get new teeth, as instead of going up them, you instead wipe out on them. It would be cool to see more of the environment used in skiing races like in bike races, but I know this is a tiny complaint in comparison. So these are the negatives. Let's be more upbeat now and talk about the positives. Riders Republic brings biking, skiing, snowboarding and rocket wingsuiting to the masses. Is rocket wingsuiting the right word? I don't actually know. 2016's Steep was a good game, but some of the criticism it received was its lack of overall content. Riders Republic feels like the game Steep should have been, with biking added to the already existing skiing and wingsuiting. The map size is huge, with so much landmass to explore and an eclectic mix of events to compete in. The world feels truly immersive. Going into the map view, you see hundreds of NPCs traversing the slopes in every biome, and that's before you start adding in other players. I didn't even realise multiplayer was locked to begin with because the map looks so populated. The interactive NPCs also add much to the game. Suki, the player's go-to for tips and tricks, is a hyperball of energy who sees you as the next big thing in Riders Ridge. Brett, the more grounded of the two, does still serve as comic relief, especially when showing off his fast travel helicopter.
I won it in a card game! I don't have papers or anything, but it's mine! Whoa.
Together, they make the tutorial levels fun to play, and even once the game lets you off the reins, Suki continues to provide funny interludes on Ridge TV, especially poking fun at Brett. So is this a game worth buying for yourself? Let's see.
It's still time to go after a podium finish. Keep at it! Time to defy gravity.
If you like extreme sports, this is the perfect game for you. It's a great mix of all three sports meshed into one fun-to-play game. Even casual racers like myself can still spend hours on the ridge competing in unique races unlike any other game currently on the market. Despite my list of negatives, I still had a blast playing Riders Republic. Like I said at the top of this video, this genre of game isn't usually my thing. However, I enjoyed my 90 minutes or so of playtime to the point that I want to go back and keep on playing. That's testament to just how fun Riders Republic is to play. The game brought back memories of slaloming down the slopes in SSX Tricky, pulling off the perfect double backflip somersault to an epic soundtrack. Sure, there are some bugs and glitches here and there, especially when riding into rocks and barriers, but considering the game is still in its infancy, I know these will be ironed out as the game evolves. So yes, I do highly recommend giving Riders Republic a try, especially if you're a fan of biking, skiing, or strapping a frighteningly large jet engine and wingsuit to your back and jumping off a cliff. I'm giving Riders Republic an 8 out of 10, but with the glitches fixed, it could easily shoot up to a 9. So those are my thoughts on Riders Republic. Have you enjoyed racing down the slopes, or do you hit more rocks than 720 backflips? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. For now though, thanks for watching. I've been Mark from Racing Games. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and now I'm off to practice my Misties and Rodeos. I still don't really know what those are, but Suki keeps telling me I need to get better at them.